Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm meteorologist Mike Ottenweller, and you have turned into your Alaska weather, brought to you by NOAA and the National Weather Service. Hope everyone out there had a great Christmas and is enjoying some downtime today. As you can see, December 26, 2018, that's the forecast for this evening. 1-800-472-0391 is how you can get in touch with any of our offices across the state. And weather.gov/Alaska, another way to get our website and our forecast information for Juneau, Fairbanks, or the Anchorage Forecast Office. And then if you need to get in touch with us here at the TV desk, nws.ar.tvweather@noaa.gov will get you in touch with Mr. Dave Snider, or someone else can help you with your questions or comments. So let's take a look at what we've got going on in our headlines. Fairly busy weather pattern getting ready to set up. It's been quiet across much of the state. Maybe some light snow or some fog. Those kind of conditions have been going on across much of the mainland. Southeast, you've been a bit busier. Things are going to get busy across the mainland too. South central, southwest, and even up towards the interior. We're looking for a pattern change as we speak right now, and it will continue to ramp up and continue into next week. So first of all, inland snow threats are going to start up for south central Alaska. So for folks in the Cook Inlet region, Kenai Peninsula, and down through the Girdwood and Portage Valley area, be advised that we're going to start to see some better chances for snow. Winds are going to diminish across southeast. You guys have all been dealing with some very strong low pressure systems and some strong winds down there. Those winds should be diminishing this evening, but the rain is going to continue for lower elevations and snow continuing for higher elevations. And then a strong storm is going to develop out over the Aleutians. We're talking fairly deep 940 millibar range. And so we're watching that system very closely for mostly marine interest, but also will impact the Aleutian Islands as well. And then a warm-up will start into next week for folks that have seen these cold temperatures for a while now. Start to see a trend, not too warm, but certainly a trend warmer than it has been this past week or so. So let's jump into it. And our only hazard for this evening is down over southeast Alaska, where we do still have that high wind warning in effect, and that is until 6 p.m. this evening. Again, Wednesday evening, the 6 p.m. for the wind warning, and that is for gusts up to 70 miles an hour out of the northeast direction, primarily impacting downtown Juneau and Douglas Island. So high wind warning in effect, and that again is the only hazard we have out across the state this evening. So what does our satellite look like? Well, here is the contributor to our high wind warning. This area of low pressure here, very tightly spun and swirling right up into southeast Alaska, and that is bringing those strong northeasterly winds feeding into that area of low pressure right through Juneau and Douglas Island. So again, that is in effect until 6 p.m. this evening. Otherwise, a weak area of kind of low pressure, a trough in the upper levels of the atmosphere, is contributing to some light precipitation making its way across the Kenai Peninsula, Homer area, Seward, Portage, all getting in on some light rain, maybe a little rain-snow mix, and that'll start to work its way up through the Anchorage Bowl. Could see some light precipitation with that later on this evening. Otherwise, you can see all the moisture that continues to make its way over the mainland and out over western Alaska. Just not a lot to move this moisture around, and this system will track off to the northeast relatively quickly. And then we start to focus our eyes down here towards the southern portion of the Gulf, the North Pacific. Our next developing system is already on its heels, and this is where we're going to really start to see the pattern become much more active. Out over the Bering, well, that's where the northeast flow has really gotten hung up along the Alaska Peninsula, stretching out over Dutch Harbor, and that is just bringing some more snow showers to these regions. Starts to mix with rain as you get to the south side of the chain there in the peninsula, but generally just a cold offshore flow impacting the Pribilof Islands, and pretty quiet weather, just cold air advection, some snow showers out towards the western Aleutians as well. And let's take a look at our loop again here. And you can see up along the Arctic coastline, we do have some stronger winds, and you can see that there with the systems moving through, where we do have some pockets of blowing snow. Those are mostly just clipping the northeast portion of the state north of Arctic Village there, but some foggy conditions stretching along the Arctic coastline. And one more time here, you can see just a chance for some slight snow showers along the northwest coast as a weak system makes its way through there, and plenty of moisture in the atmosphere. So let's take a look at our surface charts now. And let me start out over southeast where that strong system is just starting to make its way inland now. So again, those high wind warnings should be coming down later on this evening. Snow for higher elevations, but for the most part, it's been rain this afternoon across southeast Alaska, stretching really not all the way up to the Haines area, but south of Skagway, you do see some precipitation in the form of rain across the lower elevations. Nothing too heavy at this time. As we mentioned there on our satellite, some light rain making its way into the Portage Valley, also into Seward, and then some rain-snow mix over by Homer. Possibility of some light snow continuing up through the Sleet Mute and Sparivon area there over the Kuskokwim Valley. But for the most part, things pretty quiet across the mainland. Up along the Arctic coastline there, that's where we have some pockets of blowing snow, certainly some lower visibilities due to some freezing fog. And then out over the northwestern portion of the state, just some light snow because of this trough of lower pressure. As we get out over the Bering Sea and towards the central Aleutians, that's where you can start to see that northeast flow kind of just being pulled into this area of low pressure here, and that is contributing to the snow there. A little bit of rain-snow mix out over the chain, and then some rain south over the North Pacific. Snow showers, some of these a little bit heavier in nature. They will ramp up as we go into the next couple days with some stronger cold air advection. And then what we're really going to focus on here is this next area of low pressure starting to develop, and by later on tonight, this is the primary area of low pressure now developing as it comes across the Gulf of Alaska. And this is what we're going to be watching for to bring another shot of precipitation to Kodiak Island, and then eventually this will work its way up into south central Alaska, starting to make its way in here by Thursday. Before we get there, though, for the overnight forecast for southeast, continued light rain for you all, higher elevation snow up towards the Canadian Rockies, but really those winds should be on the downward trend as we go through the overnight hours. And then over towards southwest Alaska, some more light snow, nothing really heavy in the accumulation department, but some light snow will continue for much of your area down there in southwest. And then there's those snow showers really starting to get their act together, organizing across the Bering. These would be called lake effect snow showers in the Great Lakes. We call them Bering Sea effect snow showers or Bering Sea snow showers out over the Bering Sea. And then our area of low pressure is winding down there, down towards the southern portion by Dutch Harbor, south portion of the chain. And then just some light snow way out over the western Aleutians. For Thursday now, that's where that area of low pressure makes its way right up into the Gulf. Be advised for some strong winds around this area of low pressure too. It is developing, should produce a barrier jet for the mariners out there, possibly for aviation interests as well. You'd be advised that those winds will be strong. With this, as this system makes its way to the east, there could be some cold air wrapping in behind it. And so we do have some pockets of blowing snow that we're thinking will impact portions of Thompson Pass. So if you have any plans to travel back and forth from Valdez, some blowing snow through the pass could make for some difficult travel conditions Thursday morning through late Thursday afternoon. The rest of South Central will see, again, increasing chances for snow across the area, and that is mainly just the backside of this system. Not looking for anything heavy, but possibility of a couple inches of accumulation on Thursday afternoon and evening. And then, again, light snow across much of western Alaska, courtesy of just some moisture being wrapped around this whole area of low pressure and making its way out towards the Bering Sea. Bering Sea snow showers in effect across much of the area. And then our area of low pressure continues to pull that cold air, so snow on the backside, a little bit of rain-snow mix, and then more rain to the southeast of that system. For southeast Alaska, you all will see yet another area of warm air push in, and this is really going to bring another reinforcing shot of that rain like we talked about on the weather headlines. Some moderate rain is possible up towards Yakutat, but certainly plenty of rain and then some higher elevation snow once again for southeast. And then as far as Friday, well, that's where we're starting to see, again, more active weather continuing. So this new area of low pressure will develop at 995 millibars, and this is also going to spin right up along a similar track to the one on Thursday. So this will bring rain, to the southeastern portions of Kodiak Island, but for much of the Kodiak City and for over towards southwest Alaska and Bristol Bay, that's where we'll see another chance for snow to return to the area, possibility of another couple of inches of accumulation. Some rain will return to the Gulf Coast with just some light snow showers continuing inland, but these should probably ramp up as we go into the later portion of the day Friday and towards the weekend, courtesy of this area of low pressure. So again, snow threats increasing for southern Alaska and for south central Alaska. Up towards the Arctic coastline, there we still have just a few pockets of blowing snow with a large area of light snow stretching out along the western portion of the state. Those snow showers will continue across the Bering, and this is our next area of concern where we're watching this strong occluded boundary bringing plenty of warm air plenty of rain associated with it. So a quick transition from snow to rain for the western Aleutians. But with this system, we're watching out for another system to develop on the southern edge of it. You can see there 965 millibars, a pretty strong system for this time of year, and that should make its way up into our pattern as well. For southeast Alaska on Friday, some more light rain with another area of weak low pressure at 1,002 millibars, hitting mostly the southern half of southeast Alaska. Well, how about temperatures? How's that going to impact all of our precipitation that we're talking about here? And that is really going to be one of the key factors as we go into the weekend, into next week, what type of precip it will be. So for southeast Alaska Thursday morning, you can expect generally around freezing, but climbing up towards 40 degrees there for the southern areas near Ketchikan. And so we're watching precipitation types there, possibility for some rain snow mix. A little bit colder up towards Skagway and Haines and Yakutat in the mid-20s. And then for much of south central Alaska, temperatures are going to be slowly climbing up into the mid-20s. Even the Copper River Basin reaching as warm as -10, so that's quite a bit warmer than it has been there. Cold air stays in there a little bit better than it does across much of the areas closer to the waters. How about for southwest Alaska? You folks look to be in the low single digits into the teens. And then for the northern portion of the state, cold air will remain intact up there, generally between -10 and -20 across that area. For the Alaska Peninsula, temperatures generally in the mid to upper 20s. For Thursday afternoon, you can expect temperatures over southeast near 40 degrees. Temperatures across south central approaching the freezing mark. Up towards the interior portion of the state, generally below zero still. And for southwest and much of the Aleutian chain, climbing up into the upper 20s and even mid-30s. And then Friday morning, temperatures across southeast are going to be in the mid-30s. Temperatures still pretty warm across south central with now Gulkana all the way up to 0. Across the northern portion of the state, generally between -20 and 0. And then southwest, you'll start to see some of that cold air push back in, bringing things back below 0. And then on Friday afternoon, temperatures still pretty mild for southeast and staying mild across south central.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Let's head on up into your flying weather now, and as you can see here for Thursday morning, quite a bit of IFR conditions stretching across much of western Alaska. Really that moisture that's been advected up over the state is just lingering in place. No real strong system to kind of get rid of that moisture, push it offshore, or any strong subsidence to sink it down. So really it's just kind of lingering out there, and it's going to continue to linger out there for the next couple days. Around south central, there is that system in the Gulf that is helping to swing moisture up into portions of the coastal mountains there, and then up along the Alaska Range as well, with that southeast flow wrapping in with that system. Towards southeast Alaska, you all see some IFR conditions at the higher elevations, and then MVFR conditions stretching down into the lower elevations, with plenty of MVFR with lower clouds out over the Gulf of Alaska. Still plenty of moisture out there, and then MVFR conditions stretching out over the Bering Sea as well. For Thursday afternoon now, you can see those IFR conditions will continue to hamper western Alaska aviation interests, and those really are not going to go anywhere anytime soon because, again, no real strong system synoptically to move this stuff out of here. So it is just lingering across the area. IFR conditions out there west of St. Lawrence Island. And then down towards the Alaska Peninsula, more moisture starting to creep up into this area here, so IFR conditions expected. And then throughout the coastal areas of the Gulf of Alaska, expect more IFR conditions there, with more systems pushing through, helping to push the moisture up against the coastal mountains. And then, of course, MVFR conditions surrounding the IFR conditions. Friday morning, not going to be a whole lot of change in this pattern, expecting the IFR conditions to really hold steady, even increase a little bit here across south central and the Copper River Basin as another system moves into the area. And then out over Kodiak and the Alaska Peninsula, another area of low pressure helping to push more moisture into that region. And then for Friday afternoon, you can see a next front starting to slide into the area, and then those IFR conditions continuing across much of the mainland. Maybe a little bit of an improvement for southwest Alaska with VFR conditions expected as a weak area of high pressure nudges in and starts to bring some northerly flow, but otherwise IFR conditions across much of the Gulf will continue. So how does that look on our past maps? Well, you won't be surprised to see most of them going into the instrument flight rules. And Atuvik, however, will start out visual flight rules and move into MVFR. Again, same story there. But now as we get down towards the southern portion of the state, Lake Clark and Merrill, instrument flight rules, rainy instrument flight rules, windy, IFR, Isabel, IFR, Mentasta, maybe a chance to improve in the afternoon, but it's a slim chance. And then Tanita, also IFR, as well as Portage. And then Chilkoot and White, they'll start out MVFR, but with that next system pushing in, they should go down to IFR as we move through the day on Thursday. How about our freezing levels? Well, really much of the state is at the surface, and that is to be expected here in the middle of December, late December. But as you can see out towards southeastern portion of the Gulf, some warmer air courtesy of those stronger lows that are moving towards the panhandle, and that is helping to bring up freezing levels all the way to 8,000 feet down there. So how does that look for icing then? Well, again, with that moisture lingering, expect basically isolated moderate icing potential across all of western Alaska above about 4,000 feet. And then as you get towards south central, right up there along the coastal mountains, that's where we have some considerable moderate above 4,000 feet because of that system there. And then down towards southeast Alaska, above 6,000 feet, some isolated moderate expected across the general area. That next area of low pressure, bringing in some isolated moderate above 3,000 feet. How about our jet stream? Well, it's going to be pretty active, coming in from the northern Pacific, diving down across the Aleutians at about 110 knots, and then again coming up and over this fairly strong ridge of high pressure in the North Pacific, and then diving back down into the lower 48. So that's really ferrying that warm air towards southeast Alaska. The storm track continues to be pointed in that direction. It is going to change its orientation a little bit as we go towards the end of the week and become a little bit more oriented towards southwest Alaska. So we'll see some chances for some warmer air and definitely some more storms moving into the area. A small finger of the jet at about 55 knots up over the northern portion of the state. So for our winds at 9,000 feet, you can see our streamlines here. Generally a northerly flow out over the Bering, coming around this low, very tightly packed around this low at 55 knots, and then coming in from southwest up to northeast across much of the Gulf at about 45 to 55 knots here just outside this low. This low has some strong air, strong returns wrapping around it, some strong wind fields, and so about 55 knots expected there. Generally southerly flow across much of the eastern portion of the state. And at 3,000 feet, similar story with northerly winds across the Bering. A little bit more light flow here over the western Aleutians and then becoming southeasterly as you get out towards the extreme western Aleutians. And so generally that southwest wind across the Gulf with that area of low pressure bringing in some strong northwest winds through the Barrens. And how does that look in our turbulence? Well, below 6,000 feet, some isolated moderate, and then again considerable moderate like the icing right up against the coastal range there. And then another small area below 4,000 feet. Stay tuned, we'll be back with more.
This is the third year of our project. We're looking at the timing of when all the plants start growing in the summer and when all the birds come to this area. The timing of when those things happen is changing with climate change. And so we're looking at the effects of those changes. The relationship with people you work with at a camp like this is really unique. In my everyday life, I don't spend this much time with anyone, with a spouse, family members, best friends.
This is a really interesting situation where you're basically thrown into the mix with essentially a bunch of strangers.
It's kind of a really cool way to get to know people because you're pretty stripped down to bare minimum. We don't have internet, we don't have phones or anything, and so all of our social interactions are just like face-to-face personal interactions.
I'm an undergrad exchange student from Sweden.
My name is Ryan Choi, and I am a PhD student at Utah State University.
I'm a postdoctoral researcher at University of Alaska Anchorage.
I'm an undergraduate researcher and field technician from Utah State University.
And I'm a master's student at Utah State University.
And I'm here now in the YK Delta to work for the summer.
Our field season is about 5 months long. We have to show up here at the tail end of winter. Everything is totally frozen. All the rivers are frozen over, there's snow everywhere, and it's a very different landscape than it looks like right now.
Our day-to-day life here, it varies quite a bit, but the one constant is that we make a hearty and sometimes elaborate breakfast. Our downtime is almost entirely dictated by the weather. So if the weather's nasty, we're inside and we can get really creative.
If you're looking at your paper and you fold it bottom to top, what might be considered hot dog style in the past life is now valley fold.
Valley fold, okay.
You get valley fold.
It feels like I live better out here than I do back home. When I lived in Anchorage, I was totally deprived of sauna for the whole winter. It was like, yeah. Then I come out here and there's these great saunas. I do not take any credit for the construction of this sauna. It's entirely the bird camp who has put up the sauna and made these little niceties. We have the essential oils that you can put on the splash on the stove with water. So this is where you sit and get reborn.
Remote research camps like this are common in Alaska, and I think part of it is because in other parts of the world or other parts of the country, they'd be on the road system, they'd be easy to get to. But the other thing is that Alaska is unique because it's the only part of our country that is in the Arctic. And so it's really important to get on the ground and study these ecosystems.
Our Alaskan experience is very different than what most people think of as Alaska. This being my third season out here in the Delta and the final year of all of the project as well. For me, this is a very bittersweet summer. I am looking forward to having my summers back and being able to have more normal life again, but it is sad knowing that this is the last time that we'll be out here like this. Definitely spending a lot of time trying to cherish the last moments, the last saunas, and last time getting to experience what it's like being out here at the taco.
Happy birthday, dear Ryan. Happy birthday to you. Yay!
It was pretty smoky in here. We couldn't really figure out until somebody saw, like, yeah, the floor is on fire. But now we have extra drainage, so.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Okay, let's take a look at your marine forecast now, starting off with our sea ice analysis, courtesy of our ice forecaster, Mary Beth Schreck. And as you can see here for December 26th, the ice pack is obviously firmly entrenched across the Arctic coastline, down through the Bering Strait, and right here along the southwestern portion of the Bristol Bay area is where we've seen some continued growth, and that also continues to stretch up towards St. Lawrence Island. So the couple points that we want to make here is that with the warm air starting to return this weekend, that could start to just chip away a little bit here along the southern edge of the coast of the marginal ice pack, and that could help it to retreat just a little bit. So we're watching that warm air as we go into the weekend, and then also with those north winds that we talked about blowing against St. Lawrence and Nunivak Island, possibility of some of that ice to move away from the island, and then of course refreeze, redevelop on the south side of the island, but some of that ice with that northerly flow could drift away from the south side of those islands. How about for southeast Alaska now? Taking a look at the marine forecast for Thursday, you can see up towards Lynn Canal, south winds 15 knots, gust all the way up to 35 knots. Seas are about 3 feet. As we get towards the southern inner waters, southeast winds 25 knots and seas between 5 and 8 feet. Out over the open waters here, mostly a south to southeast wind, 25 to 30 knots and seas between 13 and 16 feet. Down towards, onto Friday now, down towards Lynn Canal, you can see southeast winds, down towards Dixon Entrance, southeast winds 25 knots, seas 7 feet. Diminishing as you get up towards Clarence Strait there at 15 knots, seas 3 feet. And then north winds 15 knots, seas 3 feet near Lynn Canal. Out over the open waters, southeast to south winds 15 to 20 knots on about a 11 to 13 foot sea. For South Central on Thursday, I'll slide over so you can see the rest of the Gulf. Our area of low pressure is right in here, so you do have that confused flow coming around counterclockwise, 30 to 45 knots, and then back around at 35 knots. Seas generally between 10 and 16 feet for the open waters, 30 knots out of the northeast, and 6 foot seas for Prince William Sound. And then over Cook Inlet and down towards the southern portion of the Barren Islands, you can see north winds to northwest winds, generally 20 to 35 knots, and then generally a 4 to 7 foot seas in the protected waters, 11 to 10 feet out over the open waters. A little bit calmer on Friday as that area of low pressure moves off, so generally a south wind becoming easterly towards Prince William Sound, 15 knots, seas 3 feet protected waters, but 8 to 11 feet over the open waters. And then over the Cook Inlet region, generally a north to northeast wind, 15 to 20 knots on about a 3 to 5 foot sea. For the Alaska Peninsula, you can see that confused flow again because of that area of low pressure, so becoming north and then southwest and west at about 20 to 25 knots. Protected waters, 4 foot seas, but open waters, 11 foot seas. And then around the Alaska Peninsula, a west and north wind, 15 knots, seas generally between 2 all the way up to 9 feet. And then more of an easterly wind here south of Sand Point at about 15 knots. And then on into Friday, becoming a little bit more homogeneous out of the northwest, except right there near the Shelikof Strait, southeast winds, anywhere between 20 all the way up to 35 knots, and seas on the order of about 4 to 11 feet. For the Aleutian chain, you can expect generally a northerly wind across the eastern Aleutians, and then a little bit more of a southeasterly wind across the western Aleutians, between 20 and 35 knots, and seas anywhere from 7 all the way up to 15 feet on Thursday. And then into Friday, our frontal system starts to approach, and so that's where we have our biggest concern. Seas all the way up to 30 feet and winds out of the east at 50 knots. Generally a confused northeast to easterly wind across the central Aleutians, 20 to 40 knots, and seas between 8 and 11 feet. Along the western side of the state, you can expect a northerly wind, 20 to 25 knots for the most part, and mostly ice covered, except right along the edge there, 5 to 7 knots, and expect some freezing spray in these areas too, right along the ice edge, stretching down towards Bristol Bay on those northerly winds. And then into Friday, similar story there, northerly wind becoming northwesterly all the way up to 30 knots, seas generally between 5 and 7 feet, again some freezing spray expected. Over the Arctic coast, all ice covered up there, generally an easterly wind up over the northeast portion, becoming a northerly wind for the western portion, and anywhere from 20 knots all the way down to 5 knots here north of Utqiagvik. And then on in Friday, looking for a north to westerly wind about 10 knots along the Arctic coast, and then down through the Bering Strait and Chukchi Sea, expect generally 15 to 25 knots out of the north. So let's recap tonight's weather. Our only hazard that we have is for our high winds near Douglas Island and Juneau, downtown Juneau, up to 70 knots, and that'll expire. That high wind warning will expire at 6 p.m. this evening. Otherwise, some more rain moving into southeast Alaska. Another area of low pressure starting to clip along towards south central. That could bring some snow chances for south central on Thursday. Another area of low pressure starting to creep up, and the active pattern continues with yet another system moving into south central and southeast on Friday. Well, thanks for joining us.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.